My grandfather passed 10 years ago, and yet somehow, he left me a letter I was never meant to find, until now. I never planned on opening the old suitcase. It sat on the highest shelf in our storage room, a battered brown thing with frayed corners, smelling faintly of dust and winters long gone. It had belonged to my grandfather, a man who rarely spoke, but when he did, his words felt like warm bread pulled straight from the oven. Soft. Careful. Meant to be shared. That afternoon, I was searching for something entirely different, an old charger, I think, when the suitcase slipped from the shelf and landed at my feet with a hollow thud. The latches shook loose. Something inside shifted. For a moment, I just stared at it. I'd never opened it before. My family treated it like a quiet grave, too sacred to disturb. But something tugged at me, a gentle pull, like a hand resting on my shoulder. Curiosity or destiny, I can't say. I knelt, lifted the lid, and breathed in a wave of memories I didn't even know I'd saved. The faint scent of tobacco he used to keep hidden from my grandmother, a pocket watch with a stopped second hand, a wool scarf my grandfather wore even in mild weather. Then I saw it. A single envelope tucked beneath an old sweater, yellowed at the edges, sealed but fragile. My name was written on the front, not my childhood nickname, not the formal version on my school reports, just my name, handwritten exactly the way he used to say it. Slow. Gentle. Proud. My throat tightened. My grandfather had died before I turned 15. He never wrote letters. Never left messages. His silence was part of who he was. So why this? My hands trembled as I held the envelope up to the light. I could almost imagine him sitting at the kitchen table, writing this with the same patience he used for everything, fixing watches, carving birds from wood, teaching me how to tie real knots. I wasn't ready to open it. Not yet. But I could feel it. This letter had weight, a kind of emotional gravity only truth carries. And somehow, I knew. This wasn't just a message. It was a moment he'd saved for me. A moment meant to find me exactly now. I carried the letter to my room like it was something alive, something fragile enough to break but strong enough to change me. The paper felt warm in my hand, though I knew that was just my own nervousness radiating through my skin. I sat on my bed, the sunlight falling across the envelope in a perfect line, as if urging me to open it. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I just stared at my name, his handwriting. The memory of his voice rose in my mind, soft and steady, like an old song you don't know the words to but still hum anyway. He had always spoken to me differently than he spoke to anyone else in the family. Not simpler, just clearer. Like he trusted me to understand things even before I actually did. I traced each letter with my thumb, feeling their quiet weight. Why now? Why this moment? Why did he hide it instead of giving it to me? The questions pooled in my chest, but instead of anxiety, I felt something else, something almost sacred. As if the universe had nudged me toward that storage room today for a reason. I set the letter gently beside me and lifted items from the suitcase one by one, searching for context. The pocket watch. A small wooden bird with faded paint. A folded handkerchief embroidered with initials I didn't recognize. And beneath those, a photograph I had never seen before. It was my grandfather, younger than I'd ever known him, standing by a river with a smile so wide he looked like a different man. Beside him was a woman, her face kind, her hand resting lightly on his arm. She wasn't my grandmother. My breath caught. There was no date. No name. Just the river behind them and the kind of closeness you don't fake in a photo. Was this letter about her? About a life he never spoke of? A soft chill ran up my arms, but it wasn't fear, it was anticipation. An understanding that the past was shifting, revealing corners I had never even known to look into. I picked up the envelope again. The seal looked delicate, ready to crumble. And somewhere deep inside me, I felt my grandfather's quiet voice, urging but patient. When you're ready. I drew in a slow breath. Maybe I finally was. I slid my finger under the brittle seal, half afraid it would disintegrate. It didn't, not completely, just cracked softly, as though it had been waiting for this very moment. The envelope opened with a whisper, and inside was a single folded page, yellowed but intact. My heart thudded in my chest. I unfolded it carefully. His handwriting, steady but touched with age, spilled across the page in looping strokes. For a moment, I didn't read the words. I just stared at them, the ink slightly faded, imagining the moment he'd written them. The quiet room. The lamp on his old desk. His hand trembling just a little, not from age, but from whatever he was feeling. Finally, I let my eyes drop to the first line. If you are reading this, it means I ran out of time to tell you myself. My breath hitched. I read on. There is something I carried for most of my life. Not a burden, more a truth I didn't know how to share. Not then. And by the time I found the courage, the years had already stolen my chance. I paused, swallowing the lump in my throat. This was not how my grandfather talked, not the man I knew. He was warm but closed, affectionate but quiet. Seeing emotion pour from him onto the page felt like meeting a different version of him. A version who needed to be understood. The next lines pulled me deeper. Before I met your grandmother, I loved someone. Truly loved her. And though life led me somewhere else, she left a mark on my soul I never forgot. The woman from the photograph. It had to be her. My mind spiraled with questions. Were they separated by family? Distance? Circumstance? Or was it something he lost, someone he couldn't keep? But the letter didn't answer yet. Instead, it shifted. You remind me of her. Not in the way you look, but in the way you listen. The way you carry softness like it's strength. I closed my eyes for a moment. He had never said that to me. Not once. I didn't even know he noticed the way I listened. When I opened my eyes again, the words blurred slightly from emotion, but I kept reading. I want to tell you about her. About us. And about the promise I couldn't keep, but you still can. My chest tightened. A promise? One meant for him, and now for me? Before I could read further, the page trembled slightly in my hands. I breathed slowly, steadying myself. I had opened the letter, but I hadn't opened the truth, not fully. Not yet. And something told me. The next part would change everything. I took a breath and forced myself to keep reading, even though a part of me wanted to stop, wanted to hold the moment still before anything irreversible was revealed. But the letter pulled me forward, gently but firmly. Her name was Liana, my grandfather wrote. She lived near the river, in a house her father built plank by plank. I met her in the summer I turned 20. I hadn't planned to stay long, but she changed the meaning of time for me. Liana. The name flowed softly in my mind, like water over smooth stones. It suited the woman in the photograph. The letter continued. We spent that summer thinking life would always be simple. We walked along the riverbank almost every evening. She said the water always looked like it was carrying people's stories away, so no pain could stay too long. I glanced at the photo again. My grandfather wasn't smiling like a young man posing for a picture. He was smiling like someone who felt safe. Safe in someone's presence. The letter deepened. I wanted to marry her. I even carried a ring in my pocket for weeks, waiting for the right moment. But fate does not always wait for young men. A small chill moved through me. Her mother fell ill that autumn. The kind of illness that drains every ounce of strength from a home. Liana had no siblings, no one but her father, and me. I stayed as long as I could. Longer than I told my family. But eventually, I had to return. I imagined him, torn between duty and love, pulled in two directions by forces larger than himself. My grandfather wasn't the type of man to abandon someone he loved. Which meant whatever forced him to leave wasn't small. The letter softened then, almost like a sigh on paper. We wrote letters at first. Long, hopeful ones. But as the years stretched on, life grew heavier for both of us. Her mother passed. Her father struggled. And I met your grandmother. I felt my heartbeat slow, not from disappointment, but from the quiet ache of human truth. Life, real life, rarely unfolds cleanly. I never stopped caring for Liana, he wrote. Not in the way that ruins marriages, but in the way that honors the parts of your past that shaped you. I had never thought of him as someone with a past shaped by heartbreak. He'd always just been Grandpa, steady, gentle, unshakable. But here he was, admitting there were chapters of his life none of us ever knew. Then came the line that made my chest go still. I made a promise to her before I left. One that I could not keep, and one I now ask you to fulfill. My fingers tightened around the page. A promise. A woman by a river. A love that never fully left him. And now, somehow, it was being handed to me. I read the next lines slowly, almost afraid of what they would reveal. My grandfather's handwriting dipped a little here, as if the memory had weighed on his hand even then. Before I left that last time, Liana walked me to the river. She didn't cry. She never did. She always said tears made the truth blurry. I pictured her, strong, gentle, resolute. A woman who loved deeply but held herself together even when the world trembled beneath her feet. She handed me a small wooden box. Inside it was a folded piece of paper and a simple silver chain. She said, "Keep this until the day you are certain of the life you've chosen. And when you are, bring it back to me." A silver chain. A folded note. A promise. I felt a tightness in my chest. I'd never seen such a box among my grandfather's things, at least, not yet. Was it still somewhere in the suitcase? Had he kept it all these years? The letter continued. I told her I would return, no matter what. That I would stand on that riverbank again. I could almost hear his younger voice, hopeful, determined, sincere. But life took its own path. Your grandmother needed me. Then the children came. Then work. Then age. And every year that passed, it became harder to face the truth I'd left behind. He paused there in the letter. Or at least, the writing did. It resumed with softer ink. I heard, years later, that she moved away after her father died. No one knew where. The river house stood empty for a long while. A life erased by time. A promise suspended in air. And then came the part that made my breath stutter. The box is still in my belongings. If you found this letter, you may have found it too. I want you to return it, not to Liana, perhaps, but to the place where she gave it to me. The river. I looked back at the suitcase. At the layers I hadn't fully searched. At the hidden pieces that could still be waiting. Why me, though? Why not my parents? My uncles? Why place the weight of a lifetime-old promise on my shoulders? The answer was in his next sentence. You see things the way she did. You understand quiet truths. You are not afraid of gentle things. My eyes stung. He chose me not out of convenience, but out of recognition. I folded the letter against my chest for a moment, letting the emotion settle. This wasn't just a task. It was something sacred, something that had lived silently in him for decades. A promise that had never reached its end. A promise he believed I could carry the last mile. I returned to the suitcase with a new kind of urgency, not rushed, but purposeful, like I was stepping into a chapter of his life he had left unfinished, trusting me to read the ending aloud. The scarf lay where I'd placed it earlier, soft from age and holding the faint scent of pine smoke. I lifted it gently, and that's when I saw it. A small wooden box. Exactly where he said it would be. exactly where time had left it. It was no larger than my palm, carved with simple lines, nothing ornate, nothing decorative. Just honest craftsmanship, the kind you make when your hands know love better than they know art. The wood had darkened with age, but the lid still held a faint shimmer, as if touched often by careful fingers. My fingertips tingled as I picked it up. It felt warm. Not physically, but in a way that spoke of memories held tightly for too many years. I sat back on the floor, cross-legged, the suitcase open beside me like a doorway to another life. I placed the box in my lap, hesitated, then lifted the lid. Inside lay two things. A folded piece of paper, delicate, edges curling. And a silver chain, thin but strong, catching the light like a held breath. The chain was simple. No pendant, no markings. Just a quiet piece of metal that seemed to hum with meaning. I lifted it carefully. It swayed from my fingers like something suspended between past and present. Then I unfolded the note. The writing wasn't my grandfather's. It was softer, rounder. It belonged to her. If you return, bring this with truth in your heart. If you don't, keep it with kindness. Some loves stay, even when people don't. I closed my eyes. The words weren't sentimental, they were accepting. She hadn't written a plea. She had written a release. A release he never stopped carrying. The paper trembled slightly in my hand, not from age, but from the emotion rising in me. It felt like I was holding two people's unfinished story, one that time never fully polished. At the bottom of the note was a final line. If life changes your path, may the river always know your story. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. This wasn't just an object or a memory. It was the crossroads of two lives, hers and his, and somehow, now mine as well. I placed the note back gently and held the box against my chest, feeling a quiet pulse of connection run through me. This wasn't about delivering a forgotten promise. It was about honoring a truth too tender for him to carry alone. And suddenly, I knew. I had to go to the river. Not someday. Not eventually. Soon. The next morning, the decision felt even clearer. I woke before sunrise, not because of an alarm, but because something inside me stirred with a purpose I couldn't ignore. The box sat on my nightstand, the silver chain resting atop it like a quiet reminder. I packed lightly, a bottle of water, a small snack, my phone, and the box wrapped carefully in the old scarf. It felt right to carry it that way, as if the scarf itself was a bridge between his hands and mine. The river wasn't far. An hour's drive, maybe. But I hadn't been there since I was a child, when my grandfather took me fishing on slow summer afternoons. Back then, I never questioned why he always looked out across the water with an expression I couldn't understand. Now I could. Now it all made sense. The road there felt different this time, familiar, but somehow heavier with meaning. Trees lined the sides, their branches arching overhead like a tunnel guiding me towards something waiting patiently at the end. I rolled the window down, letting the wind loosen the knots in my chest. By the time I reached the old footpath, the sun was beginning to rise. The river's surface glowed with soft gold, rippling gently as if greeting me. For a moment, I just stood there, inhaling the crisp air, letting the past settle around me without fear. The river looked exactly as he'd described it. Exactly as it had in the photograph. I stepped onto the path, my shoes crunching against the gravel. The further I walked, the more the world seemed to soften, sounds dimming, time stretching. It felt like I wasn't walking alone. Like my grandfather walked with me, steps quiet, presence steady. The trees parted, revealing a small clearing overlooking the water. And there, just beyond the tall grass, was the old house. Even from a distance, I could tell it had been abandoned for years. The paint had peeled away. The windows were clouded. But the shape of it, the spirit of it, remained. A house built beside a river. A house he once returned to again and again. A house that held an echo of Liana. I swallowed the ache rising in my chest. It wasn't just a structure. It was a memory suspended in time, his, hers, and now mine. I walked closer, the box in my hands growing heavier, but not in a burdensome way. It felt like carrying something precious, a final chapter waiting patiently to be spoken aloud. The river whispered beside me, water folding over itself with soft insistence. And I knew. This place remembered them. Their story wasn't gone. It had simply been waiting, just like the letter, just like the suitcase, just like me. The closer I moved toward the house, the more the air shifted, thick with memory, but not haunting. It felt like stepping into a story paused mid-sentence, waiting for someone to turn the page. The wooden steps creaked when I set my foot on them, the sound sharp in the quiet morning. Moss clung to the edges, and a single shutter hung loosely by one hinge, swaying in the breeze like a quiet wave. I hesitated at the doorway. This wasn't my house. This wasn't my memory. But somehow, I belonged here, because he once had, because she once had, because their story had woven itself into mine the moment I opened that suitcase. The door pushed open easily, as if it had long given up the idea of locking anything out. Inside, dust floated in the air like drifting snow, and sunlight seeped through cracks in the walls, laying thin golden ribbons across the floorboards. I didn't move at first. I just listened. To the river outside. To the whisper of old wood settling. To the feeling, gentle, unmistakable, that this place had held love as much as it had held time. I imagined my grandfather here decades earlier. Young. Hopeful. Standing exactly where I stood now, maybe holding the same chain, the same note, the same fears about life's uncertain turns. It hit me suddenly. He had walked away from this place thinking he'd return. And he never did. Not once. A quiet ache pressed behind my ribs. I stepped inside fully, my footsteps slow, respectful. The house was mostly empty, just a few faded curtains, an overturned wooden stool, a shelf where glass jars once stood. But there was something calming in the emptiness, as if the house wasn't abandoned but merely resting. I moved toward the back room, the one that faced the river. The door was halfway open, and I nudged it gently. The room was small, but bright. Light spilled through the window, illuminating a single chair positioned as if someone once sat here often, watching the water flow by. I could almost see her, Liana, sitting there with her hands folded in her lap, waiting for letters that came less frequently as time pulled lives apart. I tightened my grip on the wooden box. This wasn't just about returning a promise. It was about acknowledging a story that had lived silently for too long. I walked to the window, the river shimmering just beyond the trees, and let the moment settle around me. The past felt close enough to touch, but instead of sadness, there was a gentle warmth, as though the house was grateful someone had finally come back. I set the box on the windowsill. And for the first time, I felt the weight of what I needed to do next, lift slightly. I picked up the box from the windowsill and stepped outside, letting the door fall gently shut behind me. The river was only a few strides away, its surface flickering with morning light like a ribbon woven with memories. Every step I took toward it felt heavier and lighter all at once, like carrying someone else's heartbeat inside my own. The breeze brushed against my face, cool and familiar, as if greeting me not as a stranger but as someone returning to fulfill something long overdue. I moved through the tall grass until I reached the place where the bank sloped gently toward the water. This must have been where they stood. Where she handed him this very box. Where he made a promise with a heart full of intent and a life full of uncertainties. I knelt, the earth soft beneath my knees. The river murmured beside me, not loud, not forceful, just steady. A quiet witness. I opened the box again, carefully lifting the silver chain. It gleamed faintly in the sunlight, though it had no pendant, no symbol, just a simple loop of metal holding decades of unspoken emotion. I let it rest in my palm. For a moment, I didn't move. I just listened, to the water, to the trees, to the echo of two lives that had once met here with a tenderness the world never knew. I thought about Liana. About her strength. About her acceptance. About her line in the note, "Some loves stay, even when people don't." Maybe she never expected him to return. Maybe she hoped he would. Maybe she made peace when he didn't. But what mattered was the truth he carried, quietly, faithfully, even when life pulled him away. I whispered softly, not sure if I was speaking to him or to her or to the river itself. "I'm here. I'm finishing this for you." The words drifted into the air like petals. I placed the silver chain on a flat stone at the river's edge, letting it catch the light one last time. Then I opened the folded note, reading Liana's handwriting again, each word a gentle sigh across the years. Instead of placing it back inside the box, I pressed it to my chest for a moment. It felt warm. Personal. Real. Then I returned it gently to the wooden box and closed the lid. I didn't throw the box into the water. Something told me that wasn't the point. This wasn't about letting the river take it, it was about returning their story to the place it belonged. So I tucked the box safely between the roots of an old tree overlooking the river, where time could hold it without swallowing it. As I stood, a soft gust of wind swept across the river, ruffling the surface. It felt like acknowledgement. Like gratitude. I closed my eyes, letting the past settle and the present breathe. This wasn't just his promise anymore. It had become mine too. I stayed by the river longer than I expected, long enough for the sunlight to shift, long enough for the morning air to warm and soften. It felt wrong to rush away, as if leaving too soon would interrupt something delicate still settling into place. So I sat on the grass, my knees drawn up, watching the water slide past in slow, thoughtful currents. That was when I felt it. Not a sound, not a presence, but a memory rising inside me like a whisper brought by the wind. My grandfather's voice. Not the older, tired version I knew in his final years, but the warm, steady voice of the man who took me fishing and told me that water remembers everything. If you sit by a river long enough, he once said, you'll hear what your heart's been trying to tell you. I didn't understand it then. I did now. Because as I sat there, I heard something, not with my ears, but with the quietest part of myself. A sense of peace. A sense of completion. A sense of him saying thank you in a way words could never quite hold. I reached into my pocket and pulled out his letter again. The paper fluttered in the breeze, the ink catching the light. Reading it here, where the story began, where it paused, where it never ended, felt different. Truer. One line stood out more than ever. Some truths are not meant to be kept. They're meant to be shared, gently. A painful warmth filled my chest. All my life, I'd known him as the quiet one, the steady one, the storyteller who never spoke about himself. And now, suddenly, I was holding the part of him he'd never found the courage to reveal. It made me wonder how many people move through life carrying unspoken histories, unfinished promises, quiet wounds stitched neatly under their smiles. Maybe more than we think. A bird landed on a branch nearby, its feathers bright against the muted colors of the morning. It chirped once, sharp, clear, and then flew off toward the river house. Something in that simple motion reminded me. I couldn't stay here forever. I stood slowly, brushing the grass from my hands. The river rippled at the edge of my shoes, as if giving a final, gentle nod. I looked back at the house. At the tree holding the wooden box. At the water that had carried 2 lives' worth of stories. This wasn't lost, I whispered. It was just waiting. And with that, I turned and made my way back up the path, each step steady, each breath easier than the last. The drive home was quiet, filled only with the soft hum of tires against the road. I kept the wooden box on the seat beside me, wrapped carefully in the scarf. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Its weight was more than physical, it was the weight of a story preserved, a promise honored, a life remembered. Back home, I set the box on my desk and sat across from it. I ran my fingers over the edges of the wood, tracing the lines carved long ago. I thought about my grandfather, about Liana, about the summers by the river, and about the simple silver chain that had held decades of unspoken emotions. I realized then that the river didn't just carry water. It carried memory. It carried love that never faded, even when it was separated by circumstance. And it carried truth, waiting for someone patient enough to listen. I thought about my life, how often I rush past moments, ignoring the quiet truths around me. Maybe that was part of what my grandfather wanted me to understand, to notice, to honor, to carry forward. I placed the letter and chain back into the box, closing it gently. It wasn't just his story anymore. It was mine too. Mine to remember. Mine to protect. Mine to carry forward with care. In that moment, I felt a connection across time, to a man I barely knew, to a love he never lost, to the river that witnessed it all. And I understood that stories, quiet, hidden, patient stories, are never truly gone. They live in the people who remember them. I promised myself I would return one day. Not because I had to, but because some truths are too gentle to leave behind. Some lives too precious to let slip quietly into the past. And as I sat there, the sun casting a golden glow across the room, I knew this was just the beginning. The following days were quiet but filled with a subtle shift. Everywhere I went, I carried a sense of presence I hadn't known before. It wasn't like carrying grief or nostalgia, it was carrying understanding. A legacy of quiet promises, patience, and love that transcended time. I found myself thinking about my grandfather differently. Not just as the man who taught me to tie knots or carve wood, but as someone who had lived a life filled with hidden depth, with stories that never shouted but lingered like a soft melody. And now, I had a role in that melody, keeping it alive, honoring it, and letting it guide me. The wooden box stayed on my desk, a tangible reminder of what had been entrusted to me. Sometimes I would open it, lift the chain, read the letter again, and feel the pulse of their story. The memory of the river, of Liana's words, and of my grandfather's quiet courage seeped into my days, influencing my thoughts, my choices, even my small gestures. I realized that life isn't just about the moments we see, it's about the moments we feel, the stories we inherit, and the quiet truths we carry forward. Each act of listening, each decision to honor someone else's memory, becomes part of our own journey. And as I sat there, I finally understood what he meant by entrusting this to me. Not to finish a story, not to correct the past, but to remember it gently, to let it live, and to pass it on when the time is right. Some promises never truly end, they echo through generations, like ripples on a river, soft but enduring, shaping the life of anyone willing to carry them. Weeks later, I returned to the river, not to place anything or retrieve anything, but simply to stand where their story had begun and felt so alive. The sun glinted off the water, and the breeze carried whispers of the past, subtle but unmistakable. I knelt beside the tree where I'd left the box and felt a quiet connection settle in my chest. It wasn't about ownership. It wasn't about finishing what my grandfather couldn't. It was about presence, witnessing what had been lived, loved, and remembered. The river carried it all: hope, longing, devotion, and the gentle courage to trust someone else with a story too tender to hold alone. I stayed there for a long while, letting the water murmur its approval, letting the memory of my grandfather and Liana fill the space around me. I felt gratitude, not sadness, grateful for the chance to understand, to honor, and to carry forward something larger than myself. As I walked back along the riverbank, the air felt lighter. The story wasn't mine to end. It was mine to hold. And that, I realized, was enough. Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched you, please leave a comment about your thoughts or a story of your own. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more heartfelt stories where quiet truths and gentle moments come to life. Your support keeps these stories alive and helps others discover them too.